everyone, welcome to That Spooky. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is a weekly podcast that's basically the gayest thing to come out of Canada since Scott Thompson.
Or like Shania Twain.
Or Celine.
Yeah, Canada's got a lot of divas, honey.
We're a pretty gay country.
Yeah.
Speaking of divas, let's get into 2 minutes of Drag Race. This week it was all about diva worship.
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah, so it was episode 3 of season 11. And this week we saw the queen split up into 2 teams, each one creating like an evangelical variety show, kind of in the vein of like a Jim and Tammy Faye's 700 Club, kind of like Sunday morning feel-good show, where in place of God, they were worshiping their favorite diva of choice. So high points, low points?
Okay, well, high point for me. Let's start on the high point this week. Nina West. Nina West finally turned it out.
I know.
Yeah, she was really good in the challenge, and she was just super entertaining on the runway. Nina gave me everything I wanted from Drag Race. Ridiculous drag and a funny performance.
Totally. She completely mopped it up this episode. And like last week, she did well in the acting, but like this week, she really fucking proved why she's there.
Yeah, so I was really happy we got that Nina redemption we've been asking for.
Love it. All right. Well, I would have to say that my high point was Miss Vanjie's general energy.
Yeah.
I want to bottle that and bring it with me into my everyday life. I want to bathe in the essence of that tiny, beautiful drag queen with the most gorgeous finger-waved hair with the voice of Iago the parrot. And I'm obsessed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Low points?
Ooh. So they were diva worshipping, as we know. And what is the diva that I worship the most?
Mariah.
Mariah. And they did not know a goddamn thing about Mariah. When they sang Emotions, they sang a Whitney Houston song. When they referenced glitter, they said sparkle. There were no moments. They didn't say, I don't know her once. They didn't say dem babies once. They didn't acknowledge the fact that she celebrates anniversaries and not birthdays. And they were sitting up the entire time and not lounging.
And they could have said that they weren't doing like a worship variety show and said that they were doing like an uplifting religious docu-series, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there was just so much that was missed and not touched upon. Yeah, didn't sit well with me. They all deserved to go home.
That's fair. I'm sorry that you and the Lamely had to go through that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I would have to say that my low point was the 6-way lip sync.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm not here to see the Royal Rumble. Thank you very much.
It was more like the Royal Two-Step. They had no room to move.
Girl.
Totally fair. Yeah, they're jumping all the sharks this year in 2019.
Yeah, they're never going to put those water skis to bed.
Nope.
All right, well, now that we're out of the gay part of spooky gay bullshit, I want to talk about something spooky that's popped up recently.
Ooh, okay.
And this comes from our neck of Canada, kind of.
Okay.
Not Nova Scotia, but New Brunswick, so we're still in the Maritimes.
Close, but not quite.
Yeah, and just a heads up, if we say anything about New Brunswick, it's really not deep, it's really not personal. We come from Nova Scotia, and it's just this stupid little thing that we do where we perpetuate a non-existent rivalry with New Brunswick.
Right.
So, in Fredericton, New Brunswick,
Yes.
at the public library, there was a mysterious letter that was dropped off recently.
Okay.
And this actually made the news because this letter was penned from a ghost.
Oh, a ghostwriter, if you will.
Yeah, but this wasn't from a ghostwriter in a traditional sense. This was actually from a paranormal ghost, supposedly.
Okay.
So this letter was found, and it says, in lowercase letters, to the library. And the library is underlined. And then double underlined below it, it says, from your ghost. G-O-S-T.
Oh.
Now, we will be posting photos of this on Instagram, but it goes on to say, hi, as you can see, this is not the writing, R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G,
Oh my God.
of a grown-up. Anyway, all caps.
Did it say that?
Oh, yeah.
It's self-aware.
Yeah, this is a ghost that knows how to look inward.
Yeah.
So it goes on to say, anyway, in all caps, I love all your books. And then we fall out of that and go back into regular. And you would think that lots of all caps people have said that.
Okay.
So it's basically coming in hot, being like, look, I love you and I know you get this a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be another one of those people that's just writing you letters telling you how much I love the books, because I know you get that a lot. But I really love the books.
Yeah, this is a humble ghost that knows how to write an effective fan letter.
Yeah. Okay.
It goes on to say, I love your library. Sorry, library is a hard word to spell.
It's true.
I just love the library, and I'm right here, right now. Look, I died in 2004, but I haunt your library. That's H-A-N-T.
Oh my God.
And you probably don't believe in ghosts, but they're real, with the T-H-E-R-E in there.
Oh my God.
Look, and I'm not trying to be grammar and spelling police, but truly, this letter is also a visual experience, so I'm just trying to clue you in.
Yeah.
You know, this is an audio program.
Yeah.
So, look, I died in 2004, but I haunt your library, and you probably don't believe in ghosts, but they're real. And I'm not here for unfinished binces.
Vincent. What the hell?
That's dumb. I just love the library.
The only unfinished business that this ghost has is not having read all the books yet.
Oh, and I'm sorry. I actually misread that. That's
Okay.
not binces. That's B-I-S-N-E-S.
Oh.
So business.
Not business.
Yeah, no, it's got business. It knows. But that's pretty impressive. I just have to say.
Right, yeah, communication from the other side.
I know, right? And not even like the John Edwards crossing over type.
No, yeah.
No, like nobody got an M from any fucking corner of the room. This ghost made itself known. So employees of the Fredericton Library believe that the ghost may be anywhere between the age of 8 to 9 years old, based
Sure.
on the penmanship and spelling in the letter. And they've commented to the news saying that while they're not overly freaked out, they really truly hope that their friendly ghost visitor, who just fucking loves the library and wants to let you, and especially you, know, they just really hope that they come back and that they leave another letter.
Right.
Which I think is just gorgeous.
I think it's wonderful.
I think it's great. I don't think you need to call in a medium just yet. We will keep an eye on it, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, much love to the Fredericton Library. We really hope that this doesn't escalate into something spooky. We recommend that you keep juice boxes available at all times. And we will post this 100% verifiable evidence of spiritual activity on Instagram for everybody to enjoy.
Wonderful.
You're welcome, world. So, are you terrified?
Oh, yes, girl, I am sufficiently spooked.
Yeah, I love a child letter writer. I was a child letter writer.
Were you?
Yeah, so fun fact, when my mother's mother passed away, so my nanny, as we called her,
Okay.
I received her electric typewriter.
Okay.
Because I was obsessed with typing. I was a fast little typer as a kid. And like, I just loved watching somebody click-clack away on the
Right.
typewriter. I was also really obsessed with the keyboard sounds from You've Got Mail.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I know.
And I mean, it was probably just fun to watch your hard acrylics go click, clack, click,
That's
clack.
what I was going to say. I would imagine myself with like stiletto-tipped acrylic nails just like click-clacking away on a typewriter.
Yeah.
And that can still happen.
It could.
Yeah. And I remember when I first got the typewriter, I had like nothing to write because I was like fucking 8 years old. Like, what purpose do I have in life?
Yeah.
No reports. But I loved Beanie Babies. And I remember writing a letter that was directed toward a shop in the surrounding area that sold Beanie Babies.
Okay.
It was basically just like, look, I'm going to get you if you don't leave this, and that Beanie Baby outside your back door by this date.
You're a child criminal. You wrote a threatening ransom letter?
Well, it's not like I ever sent it or dropped it off. In fact, I was a patron of that store for many more years, and I won one of the Beanie Babies that I wanted
Oh, there you go. The ethical way.
Yeah, destiny worked in my favor as a child letter writer.
Yeah.
But shortly thereafter, I remember watching The American Justice about the Unabomber with my mom.
Oh.
And that's about the time where I was like, it's great that I never sent any of those letters or did anything with those stupid little things that I was writing on my typewriter 2 years ago. Because, girl.
Girl, you'd have been living in the woods hiding from the FBI.
Yeah, and if I'm going to risk blowing myself up, it's going to be for meth. At least I'll be numb, you know?
Yeah, totally.
I've never partaken, but it's like, honestly, if I'm ever at that point where I'm like, I could blow up, I mean, I may as well be on the party train, you know?
Fair enough. I mean,
What the fuck is happening today?
I don't know.
All right, oopsies.
Oopsie
Sorry.
poopsie. Oh, I was just going to say, disclaimer, everybody, don't do math.
Yeah, can't speak from experience, but from those late nights of looking at the faces of meth photos, do you know those ones, like the time lapse?
Sure.
Ones?
Yep.
Yeah, that's enough to scare you off of shit.
Yeah, that's the glow up you don't want in life.
Yeah, so oopsie poopsies.
Oopsie poopsies. Well, once again this week she's perfect, and I don't have any oopsie poopsies that I'm aware of.
Yeah, only plot holes because we've never been able to find that IKEA monkey's name.
No, that's true.
I just want to know more about that fucking monkey.
Right? Where is she?
Who is she?
Is it with Zoltan?
Oh my god, what the fuck? We have not talked about him in a while.
I know, right? And I still don't know what happened to Zoltan, mostly because I haven't tried to find out what happened to Zoltan.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, you might want to flash back to episode 1 for that.
Yeah.
Way more mouth sounds, way more ums.
Yep.
We were pretty timid. It's an experience, but I mean, 24 episodes later, and we're still the dumb bitches we were in that one.
It's true. It's like that weird unaired episode of Buffy where Willow wasn't played by Allison Hannigan.
Yeah, and we didn't do a What Did We Learn today. It's kind of like the pilot episode of The Golden Girls where they had that gay male maid named Coco.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's our Coco.
But episode 1 is still one of my favorite stories that I've ever told on this. I love the Jane Mansfield story. Anyway, I basically don't have an oopsie poopsie.
Ooh, I guess we're both perfect.
Yeah, well, who the fuck's gonna refute that rock solid evidence on the Comedy Store that I had?
Hey, true, right? Pauly
Yeah.
Shore, where you at?
Comedians never lie. Anyway, cool. So you're going first this week, right?
Yes, I am.
That is so convenient.
It is. I have to wash my hair after this, so like I need to get this done.
Totally, and I'm getting my neck beard microbladed.
Oh.
Take it away.
Okay, and with that seamless segue, this week I am going to be talking about the Shiva Tripathi and Sumitra Singh case.
Okay. Don't come for my segues, but I'm super interested.
Yeah, so for this story, we're going all the way to India.
Wow.
So Shiva Tripathi was born October 24th, 1962, to a family of the Brahmin caste.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you know what castes are?
Yeah, your girl took world religion.
For sure, yeah. So it's basically like a social class system for anybody who isn't familiar with it. But the Brahmin are like the highest caste. So her father, Ramsiya Tripathi, was a college lecturer, and she grew up in the city of Itawa and graduated from college with a BA in home economics. At age 18, she entered an arranged marriage with Chetty Lal, her husband, and moved in with his family who lived in Dibyapur. It was pretty customary for the wife to move in with the husband's family, and Chetty and Shiva had 2 sons, and they nicknamed them Rinku and Tinku. So there was actually some considerable animosity between Shiva and her in-laws, perhaps because they were irritated by Shiva's higher education, or because they were unimpressed with the dowry they received when Shiva married their son, Chetty, which was actually something that they wrote about often in letters.
Gotta get that dowry money, honey.
Yes, honey, make it rain. So, regardless of the reason, there was animosity, and things hit that boiling point in May 1985 when Shiva's in-laws blocked her from attending an exam, allegedly.
That's petty as fuck.
Right? Like, no, you can't go off and better yourself.
Yeah, that is a total losing battle. It's like they hate you for whatever reason, and then they're not allowing you to expand your horizon.
Yeah. Not cool.
That's a deal breaker, honey. Get out of there.
That's a deal breaker, ladies. So anyway, on the evening of May 18th, Shiva's maternal uncle by marriage visited the family, and he was told by Shiva that her mother-in-law and sister-in-law had beaten her. He tried to calm her down and resolve things, but when he left that night, Shiva was still pretty upset.
Understandably.
Totally. The next morning, the same uncle had heard that Shiva's dead body had been found on the railway track at a nearby station.
Oh.
When he arrived, Shiva's in-laws said she had thrown herself in front of the train. So, suicide.
How the fuck do they know? The lady doth protest too much.
Methinks. So Shiva's uncle, her sister Uma, and brother-in-law were the first to see her body, which was intact except for an injury on her head. Shiva's uncle requested the cremation of the body be delayed so that he may bring Shiva's father, Ramsiya, to have his final goodbyes. However, while he was traveling to get Shiva's father, the in-laws obtained permission from local authorities to cremate her body, and they did so. And they even expedited the cremation by adding fuel.
Nothing to see here, you shady fucks.
That's it. So, of course, this started to arouse some suspicion, and there were rumors going around in town that some people had seen Shiva's in-laws the night before carrying her to the railroad station late at night. When Shiva's father arrived to find out that his daughter had already been cremated, he was furious and immediately reported the death to the authorities. Shiva's husband and father-in-law were arrested first, but were ultimately released from prison due to lack of evidence.
Okay.
At this time, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law went into hiding, but were arrested upon their return in 1986. But guess what?
What?
They were released due to lack of evidence.
Fuck that.
So although they had all been detained at one point, they were all released from prison. Papers ran the story and the murder accusations, but ultimately the accusations went nowhere, and Shiva's death was deemed a suicide.
Fuck that.
So now, 2 months after Shiva's death, 17-year-old Sumitra Singh had fallen ill. So Sumitra was born in 1968. So Sumitra and her family were of the Kshatriya caste, which was a level below the Brahmin caste. Her mother died when she was pretty young, when she was 11 years old, and even before that, her parents spent much of her childhood apart. So due to this dynamic, Sumitra was often separated from one or both of her parents, especially when she lived for 8 years with an older cousin in a neighboring district.
Okay.
So Sumitra never attended school and was taught rudimentary reading and writing by her cousin, who had attended at least 1 or 2 years of school.
He was like, I've got you.
Yeah, I'm an academic pro girl.
Yeah.
Here's your ABCs, here's your 1, 2, 3s. So when Sumitra was 13, her family arranged a marriage with Jagdish Singh of the village Sharifpura. Immediately, Sumitra had moved in with his family. Her husband was often away for months at a time, pursuing employment in Delhi, which meant that Sumitra spent most of her days with her in-laws. After 3 years of marriage, at the age of 16, Sumitra gave birth to a baby boy in December 1984. A month or two later, Sumitra began having episodes of loss of consciousness, which was described kind of like a trance. During these spells, her eyes would often roll into the back of her head and her teeth were clenched really tight. Oftentimes they would last for just minutes, but every now and then they would continue on for an entire day. Her in-laws sought aid from local healers to hopefully help with these spells, but nothing really seemed to work. On about July 16th, 1985, Sumitra predicted that she would die 3 days later, and sure enough, on July 19th, 1985, after an unexplained fever, she lost consciousness and appeared to die.
What?
So eyewitnesses agreed that her respiration and pulse stopped and her face drained of blood for at least 5 minutes. But as her family members began mourning her, she came back to life. However, her identity appeared to have completely changed.
Stunt queen.
Yes, mama.
Oh my god.
We love a reveal.
I love it. She ripped off her brown hair and she was like, I've been a blonde this whole time.
Right, exactly. She's got a wig underneath the wig. So when Sumitra awakened, she'd appeared to not recognize her surroundings or the people around her, and the people around her were her family.
Totally.
She spoke very little the next day, but then she began to say that her name was Shiva and that she had been murdered by her in-laws in Dibyapur.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Oh, yes, she did.
Girl.
So she wanted nothing to do with Sumitra's husband and infant son, and instead she begged to be taken to her children.
She's like, you bore me.
Exactly. One child, I want 2.
I love it. She can finally be as grand as she's always wanted to be.
Exactly.
Reinvention after trauma.
Exactly.
Love it.
So the family at first was like, what is going on? They thought that Sumatra had like gone insane or that she was possessed. So they didn't really make any attempts to verify the things that she was saying. They just assumed she had like sustained brain damage or something for being unconscious for so long.
Totally fair. And like maybe she had heard about the story before and it become like implanted, or it's kind of where your mind wants to go if you put yourself in the position of, you know, having a family member going through this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so interestingly enough, Shiva's father, Ramsiya, was actually visiting Divyapur around this time, and he heard a rumor that his deceased daughter had possessed a girl. Now, it took him 3 months, but on October 20th, 1985, Ramsiya came to visit Sumitra, who was claiming to be his daughter.
I bet she had words for him.
Well, actually, she cried upon meeting him. Now, it can't really be claimed that she recognized him since she had been told that he was coming, but regardless, she had a very emotional response when she saw him.
Okay.
Now, during his visit, he also showed Sumitra some pictures in a photograph album. Now, she was able to correctly identify all 6 family members in a photograph that had been taken 18 years earlier. She was also able to easily identify photos of her grandmother, her mother, her father, her brother. Upon seeing the photo of Shiva's young son, Tinku, Sumatra began to cry and asked where Tinku and Rinku were. Now, remember, Tinku and Rinko weren't their actual names. These were like nicknames given to these children.
Oh, yeah. Spooky.
And then it gets spookier because upon seeing a photo of Shiva's sister-in-law, she said, "That is Ramakanti who hit me with a brick."
Girl. Mm-hmm. She knows.
She knows. And that statement was enough for Ramsiya. He was entirely convinced that Sumitra was his daughter returned.
Shit, spilling the tea.
Yeah, he was like, "This is my daughter. I don't know what's going on, but this is my fucking daughter," because it was just too eerie.
Yes, daddy.
Of all the photos she was shown, she was only unable to identify 2 pictures. Out of this entire plethora of photos, there were only 2 people that she didn't recognize. Now, conversely, Sumitra no longer recognized people in her own family. So earlier photos of her husband, her 9-month-old son, her in-laws, her father when he visited, and the cousin she had lived with for 8 years, and her husband, she didn't recognize any of them.
Like, I don't know her.
Exactly. She was like, I know her, but I don't know her.
Totally. That is heartbreaking to think of it from the family's perspective, though.
Right? Exactly.
Like, to still have a loved one there, but to lose them in that way, like that, yeah.
And then being the other family to have lost a loved one, but then have some stranger claiming to be them out of fucking nowhere.
Totally.
And so, in addition to this being able to recognize people that she probably shouldn't be able to recognize, Sumitra exhibited a lot of behavioral changes. So moreover, she started to act a little bit more dignified, like a high caste educated woman. So remember, Shiva had been a Brahmin with a university degree, and Sumitra was more of the rural village family type. Those close to her also noted that Sumitra now wore her sari in a more dignified way, and she wore sandals instead of going barefoot, which she basically just did all the time. Mm-hmm. Sumitra also became an early riser, as Shiva had been. So Sumitra also now refused to respond unless she was addressed as Shiva, and she also became more formal in the way she addressed other people, including her husband and his parents.
Whoa, she's method.
Yeah, totally. So she became kind of more snobbish towards her in-laws, and she even asked her husband to wash his plates and utensils while they were visiting a Brahmin home, since he was of a lower caste.
Oh, you're pulling the class card on your husband.
She is, mama.
Okay.
And she also refused to participate in an important Hindu ritual in which a sister ties a string around her brother's wrist, despite her brother begging her to do so.
Be a sis.
But she's like, "I'm not your sis." So Sumitra also refused at first to be intimate with her husband, and she didn't even acknowledge her baby son. She claimed it was a product of a previous marriage. But eventually, however, she did accept her role as wife and mother, while still insisting that she was Shiva. She's reported to said that, "I have to look after this child. God will take care of them. If I neglect this child, would God not punish me?"
She's like, "Fine, I'll play along. I'm your mother, whatever."
Exactly. And like, I don't know, that's got to be a pretty fucked up foundation to build a mother-son relationship off of.
That, or it's a very fabulous way just to start off on a new foot with your family. Be like, "Look, I don't remember you, and I'm a totally different person now, so everything everything that's happened before this, null and void.
Exactly, right?
Great excuse to start wearing berets.
Exactly. You know, she just wanted to try some new fashion trends, but she didn't really have the confidence to do it before.
She's like, I never saw myself in pearls before.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when Jennifer Lopez became J-Lo, or when Christina became ex-Tina.
Totally. She's just becoming Shiva.
Exactly. So on top of all of these other changes, she also became much more literate and improved exponentially. So having learned rudimentary reading and writing from her cousin as a child, her literacy wasn't exceptionally high. But suddenly, after she claimed to be Shiva, she was able to read and write far beyond her previous abilities, including her ability to write Hindi. She would write to Shiva's birth family, the Tripathis, just as Shiva had done when she was alive. In the letters that she wrote after her so-called awakening, she often spoke about how she did not like it there and that she felt like God had punished her by dumping her there. It was also assessed that although Sumitra's level of literacy had increased significantly, it still fell short of Shiva's. And so now, as news about this continued to spread, it started to gain the interest of a lot of academics in the field of psychology, physics, philosophy, and journalism, and a lot of different academics examined this case over the years. So in October 1985, Ian Stevenson and Satwant Parishna were the first people to ever review the case. They began investigations independently, but started to work together on finding out more about the case and verifying details. So together, they started to interview Shiva's family and Sumitra's family and anyone who witnessed the aftermath of Shiva's death on the train tracks. Through their research, Stevenson and Parishna learned that Sumitra apparently knew a lot of intimate details about Shiva's family. And in fact, over time, Sumitra showed such a complete knowledge of Shiva's life and relationships that the rest of Shiva's family also became convinced that Sumitra was actually Shiva living in a different body.
Holy shit, she must have been convincing.
Yes. So she knew like really weird details, like where certain items that she owned were stored in her room.
Did she get her journal at a yard sale?
Who knows? I mean, they were pretty quick to cremate her. They were probably pretty quick to get rid of all of her shit.
Totally.
Okay, so going back to this research carried on for quite a long time, from October 1985 to October 1987. And all this while, Sumitra remained convinced that she was in fact Shiva. So this research essentially confirmed that the families had not known each other. And in fact, because they lived 60 miles away and were of different castes, it's unlikely that they would have any association with each other. Researchers also found no reason for the families to lie about their association had they actually known each other. And in fact, the only possible association before the transformation could have been the newspaper articles that were written about Shiva, though they carefully compared Sumitra's statements to the article, and it was apparent that the information was not the same. So another psychiatrist, Sri Dayal, carried out an investigation concurrently and presented it at a conference in India in March 1987. As well as interviewing Sumitra and their families, Dayal asked people who knew her well to complete a psychological questionnaire and performed a Rorschach test on her. He also had a handwritten analysis performed of the 3 letters, 2 written by Shiva and another said to have been written by Sumitra following the transformation. And they kind of matched pretty well.
Okay.
So according to Dayal, because she had been deemed possessed at one point, she was subjected to a lot of cruel torture continuously for a long period of time by an ojas, which is basically like an exorcist or spiritual healer.
Shit.
Of course, none of this worked, and she remained in the Shiva persona. Apart from a brief reemergence of Sumitra when she became quote-unquote confused for a few hours and seemed to resume her ordinary personality in autumn 1986.
She was like, does it feel any different? No, I like Shiva better.
Exactly, yeah. So Sumitra, amongst all of this, made one appearance a year after the transformation.
Yeah, she's like, that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Now, during his interview processes, Dayal also noted that Shiva, once awakened in the body of Sumitra, claimed to have had memories from the intermission between Shiva's death and her awakening.
What?
Yeah, so we have some like afterlife accounts.
Okay.
So she basically said that she had been brought before Lord Yama, the Hindu god of death, and she saw people with their feet turned backwards being punished according to their karma. Some were being whipped and some were being thrown into boiling water. The goddess Mata came to her aid, hiding her under the plank on which Yama sat and fed, and after some days Sumitra begged for mercy from Yama, who agreed to send her back for 7 years.
Specific.
Very.
They're not fucking around in the afterlife.
No, mama. And so with so many academics assessing the case, they came up with some conclusions as to what might have been going on. Essentially, as far as they were concerned, there were 2 plausible explanations: possession or reincarnation.
Implanted memories and mental illness, not a part of the conversation.
It was a part of the conversation, but based on the information that they had, it just didn't make sense because she just knew way too much.
Okay.
But again, this is all the opinion of 1, 2, 3 people.
They're like medical reports. She's too legit to quit.
Exactly. So Stevenson basically describes that there are several typesets of possession. There is a partial temporary possession, which is basically where the person goes in and out of personas. A complete temporary possession, where the person completely takes on the persona of another for a short period of time. And then there's a complete permanent possession, where a person takes on the complete persona of another forever, which is akin to reincarnation. So there was another researcher, James G. Matlock, and he coined the term replacement reincarnation for cases where one spirit replaces another permanently without the body dying, which would be exactly this case. Matlock notes that the replacement usually happens after an often severe illness takes place, and that it really only happens within 2 age ranges, that being from ages 1 to 3, and then rarely in the teen years. So these were the 2 theories that they could really only settle upon: possession or reincarnation. But there is also a 3rd theory that was being presented by another academic named Broad, and he thought that perhaps Sumitra was a medium, a telepath, or a psychic. So he began this theory because any time in which Sumitra identified Shiva's family and friends from photographs, there was always someone in the room who would have known the person in question. So he thought that perhaps Sumitra, whether on purpose or not on purpose, was picking up on the thoughts of other people and then kind of subscribing them as her own.
Okay.
Broad also considered that perhaps the reason why she was doing this, if she was a psychic, was to maybe attempt to move up in a caste, or perhaps was trying to get attention, which I'm like, girl, there are other ways to get attention. Like, oh, she just wants attention? I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite rare that somebody wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what, I want to completely uproot my life today.
Just for attention. All of this to say, Broad basically concedes, though, that the consistency of Sumitra's abilities to recognize individuals known to Shiva exceeds that of even the best psychics, which he basically points out as being a count against her maybe having psychic abilities. Furthermore, it's argued that the full embodiment of this character being Shiva, would have been just really uncharacteristic and challenging to not break for years and years.
They're like, and she hasn't even done an acting class.
Exactly. So now if we talk about this lapse that she had in the autumn of 1986 again, when she returned to her normal self for a brief period of time, it's been questioned if Sumitra's spirit remained in her body, lying dormant after her body was taken over. And obviously the answer to this we'll never know. But as you also mentioned, another theory is that perhaps Sumitra had a dissociative identity disorder that brought forth latent faculties, such as her mannerisms and her reading level.
Yeah, I mean, not to be a party pooper, but I mean, that's kind of what first jumped out to me.
Yep, exactly. But if that is the case, it still doesn't really explain how Sumitra knew so much about Shiva.
Totally.
So after this initial research that happened in the 1980s, there was nowhere really for it to go. But 2 researchers named Mills and Dinman decided that they wanted to revisit the case. When they started their research, they discovered that Sumitra had died in 1998 at the age of 30, and her husband died 10 years later in 2008. They also learned that the couple had eventually moved, and with this move, Sumitra slowly lost contact with Shiva's family around 1988. It was apparently pretty difficult for Shiva's father and siblings to continue communication with Sumitra, and so they slowly communicated less and less over the years.
Fair enough.
Also during their research, Mills and Diman learned that Shiva's children, Tinku and Rinku, were being raised by their aunt, the woman who was suspected of killing her.
Oh, fuck her.
Furthermore, both sons had no memories of their mother, and all the way up until she died, Sumitra never swayed from her conviction. She claimed to be Shiva all the way up until her death, which by Stevenson's standards was essentially classify her as having a permanent possession. So was she possessed? Was she reincarnated? Was she a dubious medium? Was she suffering from an identity disorder? No one can really say for sure, and no one will probably be able to say for sure, but this case kind of remains as one of the most prominent examples of life after bodily death and the possibility of reincarnation.
Shit.
So I got all of this information from an article by Karen Werstein. It's a really in-depth article. It has a lot of resources. It points to all of these academic journals done by all of these academics. So if you really want to go deep into this and learn about it inside out, you can go check her out.
Cool. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome. I read this and I thought it was really kind of an amazing story. I'd never heard anything quite like this before.
Totally. I'd never heard of it before now, but that's wild. There's so many components to it.
Right? And the idea of reincarnation, pretty spooky.
Yeah, and at the heart of it, I mean, like, girl, that's some true crime.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right, well, that's all you got?
That's all I got, baby.
Cool. My turn?
Your turn.
Now, I just want to say before we get going, if you happen to hear any screaming in the background, it's just the eve of St. Patrick's Day, it's late on a Saturday night, and a lot of people are making a lot of really poor decisions right now.
Yeah.
So just know that everything's cool. There's probably just a lot of deep conversations happening at really close proximity.
Yeah, for some reason they're still yelling.
But like, yeah, exactly, like 3 times louder than usual.
Yeah.
So just a heads up. So today I'm doing something true crime.
Cool, into it.
Yeah, and I'm doing something that's pretty queer.
Cool, into it.
So today I'm going to be talking about the murder of Scott Amedure, also known as the Jenny Jones murder.
Oh, bitch, I know her.
Yeah, but just recently.
Just recently.
And it's funny because I actually brought it up to Tyler in conversation a few weeks ago, being like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to do the Jenny Jones murder. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I had never heard about it before.
Yeah, well, and I thought everyone kind of knew about this. So Scott Amedure was born on January 26th of 1963 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Father was Frank Amedure. He was a tractor-trailer driver. His mother was Patricia Graves Amedure. She was a stay-at-home mother. In 1968, when Scott was 5, his family moved to Waterford, Michigan. And then 2 years later, in 1970, his parents divorced. Scott ended up moving in with his father, along with his sister and 3 brothers. And all things considered, you know, like he had a pretty average childhood.
Right.
Now, he quit school at the age of 17 to join the Army, but ended up getting his GED high school equivalency while he was training.
Sure.
And he ended up getting training in satellite communications. So 3 years after joining the Army, he ended up getting honorably discharged because of an injury that he had sustained while skiing.
Okay.
So he was posted in Germany, and that's when he kind of developed this love of skiing. He went off to Switzerland. That's where it happened. He goes back to civilian life in Michigan once he's discharged, and he goes to work in like technical communications and telecom.
Cool.
Yeah, and then shortly after that, he became a bartender because he really enjoyed working in nightlife. So he ended up getting a home for himself in Lake Orion, Michigan, and he was just kind of living his life. Now, Scott was an openly gay man.
Good for her.
Yeah, and Scott actually became known in the local gay community because he took in a number of gay male friends that he had that ended up being diagnosed with AIDS.
Wow.
That were rejected by their families. So he took them in, he let them live with him, and he took care of them. He was a really generous person.
Yeah.
He had a really big heart. He had this friend named Donna Riley, and she happened to live above this guy named Jonathan Schmitz. And Scott's friend Donna Riley was pretty friendly with him.
Right.
A little info on Jonathan, even though I barely give a fuck about him.
Okay.
Born on July 18th, 1970, he lived in Lake Orion. He's 24 at the time that all this is going down. So he's like 8 years younger.
Right.
Now, I don't know if this was Scott Amedure. I don't know if it was his friend Donna. I've seen mixed accounts. But in early 1995, one of them was watching the Jenny Jones show. Now, at the end of the show, there was a general call out looking for people who had secret crushes who might be willing to possibly appear on the show.
Right.
So Jenny Jones was on the air for 12 years. Have you ever watched Jenny Jones?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty infamous. Jenny Jones, Ricky Lake, watching Maury.
Yeah, so if you don't know, judged by the company she's keeping, Jenny Jones was a trashy daytime talk show. Jenny was a real showbiz gal. She started off as a drummer. She was actually part of a group called the Cover Girls. She taught herself how to play through listening to Beatles records.
The Cover Girls?
Mm-hmm.
That's cute.
I know, I love it. But then she actually transitioned from music to stand-up comedy. So she ended up appearing on Star Search wearing dresses that she made by hand, may I add. Yeah, so multifaceted. But she ended up winning Star Search, doing stand-up comedy, and getting like the $100,000 top prize.
Oh shit, it's like Drag Race.
Yeah, exactly. But unlike Drag Race, her career was shot from the get-go because essentially she got branded like a lounge act.
Right.
Basically, they were like, enjoy playing in a dive bar in Vegas for the rest of your life, but you're not one of us, mama.
Could that maybe because she was a woman in comedy?
Yes, because at the time they were probably like, no, sorry, we have Joan Rivers and there can only be one at a time.
Right.
Yeah. Deal is Jenny Jones was like, ma'am, I'm going to create my own work. So she created like a women-only stand-up comedy night, toured it around fucking America, and made a name for herself.
Yes.
Yes. And because of the attention that she received from that, she was able to parlay it into getting her own talk show. So the Jenny Jones show was really just kind of like her first and like big mainstream gig.
Yeah.
And she was at the helm. So when the show started in September of 1991, she essentially became a millionaire within a few years. But the deal is, it's a trashy daytime talk show. It loved putting people on the spot.
Right.
It loved pulling bullshit on people. You know, like you're not the father tests, not the hot makeovers, throwing kids in jail, parading queer people out and laughing at them, all that kind of 90s talk show shit.
All under the guise of probably a very clever and catchy episode title.
100%. Now, the deal is Donna and or Scott, when they see this call at the end of an episode of the Jenny Jones show for people who have secret crushes, they start hatching a plan.
Right.
Because the deal is Scott had a little bit of a crush on Jonathan, and the whole idea was like, oh, wouldn't it be real fun to like bring him out and be like, oh, someone's got a crush on you, and then it's Scott.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the specifics of it, but allegedly Scott had been led to believe that Jonathan may have been bisexual.
Right. A lot of whispers and secrets.
Yeah, so why not ambush someone on daytime television?
Exactly. They get a free trip out of it.
Yeah, and the Jenny Jones show was so fucking down. So they ate up the story about the secret crush on the unsuspecting man, and in fact they ended up changing the episode idea from secret crushes to same-sex secret crushes.
Right.
Which is what the episode ended up getting called. So the Jenny Jones producers booked all three of them to fly out to Chicago to appear on the show from Michigan. When they ended up contacting Jonathan to confirm him on the show, the Jenny Jones producers tell him up front that he has a secret admirer. They basically give him the rundown of the show, being like, oh yeah, it's all about secret crushes, but they don't lead on that it's a man.
Right.
Basically, they're like, well, it could be a man, it could be a woman, and Jonathan on the phone was very straight up and was like, don't play games. If it's a man, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
So after Jonathan protests on the phone a bunch, the Jenny Jones people essentially go, oh yeah, no, it's a woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they have him hook, line, and sinker. What they don't do at this time, though, because it's 1995, they don't vet the guests. They don't look into their past history. They don't look into their mental health history like they do now.
Right.
This is a problem because if they had looked into Jonathan Schmidt's history, they would have quickly realized that he had a documented history of mental illness and of drug and alcohol abuse.
Right. Not a good combo.
No, and if you called anyone that he knew, even his friends, they would have been able to tell you stories about him nailing himself inside closets and building altars to girlfriends that he had.
What the fuck?
Yeah, like serious kind of shit.
That's a whole other level of diva worship.
Totally. But the thing is, even at that time, like it's the mid 90s, the conversations about mental illness are different. A lot of people would look at a guy with rage like that and just go, no, it's a personality deficit.
Right.
It's not an illness.
Right.
He's just tough.
He's just a man.
Yeah. So basically, Jonathan had also recently been in a serious relationship, which had just been called off a few months earlier. So when he got the call from Jenny Jones, he basically thought that it could have been his ex-girlfriend trying to get back with him, or his mind also went to this person that he worked with who he thought he had like a little bit of a spark with.
Right.
So before Jonathan leaves, he goes out and buys a brand new outfit, like sport coat, shoes, all that kind of shit. He was super excited. He also starts going around and telling everybody about this.
Right.
He totally thought it was going to be a turning point in his life. So he's telling all of his friends, all of his coworkers, and all of the guys.
No. Bros.
Oh yeah, sorry, all the bros. He said that if it was his ex-girlfriend, then he was going to ask her to marry him on the spot on the Jenny Jones show.
Oh, bitch.
So they all fly out to Chicago shortly before taping. Jonathan flies out on his own. Scott and Donna Riley travel together. Now, the show ended up getting taped on March 6th of 1995, and it was set to be aired 2 weeks later. The episode never ended up airing, though.
Okay.
You can still see clips of it, though, because the full tape ended up having to be shown at the trial.
Right.
Let's get into it. So let's talk about what happens in the clip. Top of the segment, Jenny Jones opens up, all smiles, standing in the crowd.
Vaseline on her teeth, ready to go.
Pageant ready, 1995 talk show shit, and she's got questions. So she says, which of these ways would you choose to reveal your secret crush on someone? A, would you write that person a letter? B, would you tell that person in private in case he rejects you? Or C, would you tell that person that you're gay and that you hope he is on national television? And the crowd goes wild.
That was the answer she was looking for.
And that's the answer that everybody wanted to hear. Welcome to the garbage fire. So Jenny introduces Scott and Donna. They're sitting up on stage and there's an empty chair next to Scott. They set up the situation. Basically, they say that Jonathan Schmitz is backstage and he can't hear them. He's got a set of headphones on. Jenny starts to ask about how they first met. Scott says that one day he went over to Donna's place. Jonathan was working on her car. Supposedly he was checking her brake lines.
Okay.
So he was like half underneath poking around. Jenny says, oh, so that's the first time. What's your first impression? And Scott's like, oh, only saw the lower half of him, so you can imagine he's hot. Yeah, so then Jenny just starts in. She's like, oh, so do you have any fantasies about him? And then she asks, she's like, oh, well, don't you specifically have one about him in the car? You know, like goat. He's like, oh, yeah, something about brake oil lines snapping. And the thing is, you can tell when you look at Scott's body language, it's like he's smiling. He's throwing the ball back to Jenny Jones, like he's playing the game. But at the same time, he's really kind of nervous.
Sure.
So she goes further. Jenny Jones says, oh, well, you had one in a hammock, too. Tell us about that.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, he had a conversation with the producer. They farmed him for information, and then she had it all up on her cue card.
Right.
So Jenny Jones, pushing the conversation forward, goes into that. Scott very nervously says, I have a hammock in my backyard and thought about tying him up. And then Jenny Jones is like, oh, and then he says that it involves whipped cream and stuff, as he says. And
right.
Jenny's like, oh, so he knows you're gay. Do you know he is? And Scott just kind of grins and is like, anything's possible.
Right.
Then Jenny asks what's so exciting about Jonathan. And Scott says that he's got a, quote, cute little hard body, something you want to put in your curio cabinet. You know, like, oh, you're pint size. I could just put you on my shelf, you know.
What's a curio cabinet? Like a cabinet of curiosities?
Yeah, it's like a display cabinet. Yeah, like a place to put your miniatures.
Okay.
So Jenny Jones, hearing that he wants to pick him up and put him in his curio cabinet, she's like, oh, you want to pick him up?
Oh my God.
And then Scott's like, oh, he's a tiny little thing. So he's just like spilling the tea. And then after some time, they take off Jonathan's headphones and they bring him out.
Right.
So he comes down the stairs behind him, sees Donna right away, goes in for a hug, gives her a little peck on the cheek. You can tell right away Jonathan is just kind of like, oh my God, my neighbor has a crush on me.
Right.
He sees Scott next to her. He's like, oh, she brought her gay best friend. friend. You know, he's not vocalizing this, but you can fucking tell.
Yeah.
So he shakes Scott's hands, and then Scott just like wraps one arm around him and tries to give him a hug. Now, this is pre that bro hug being popular, but you can kind of tell like there's some weird toxic masculine shit going on because Jonathan just can't process the idea of hugging a guy.
Right, yeah.
He just kind of like shudders away.
At that point, young men were still just punching each other in the balls and telling each other to suck it.
So many white men with cornrows. So they sit down. Jenny Jones is like, oh, do you think Donna's the one that has a crush on you? And Jonathan's like, oh, did I? No, we're good friends. And Jenny Jones just like fucking cuts him off. And she's like, well, guess what? It's Scott that's got the crush on you.
Then she takes a big bite out of her ham sandwich.
Yeah, it's a moment in surprisingly poor timing for somebody who won Star Search for stand-up comedy. Anyway, basically, as soon as the words come out of Jenny Jones's mouth, Jonathan just looks down at Donna and with a big smile just kind of goes, you lied to me.
Okay.
And then he just starts clapping and laughing. And then Jenny goes, okay, now before we talk, let's look at a playback about what Scott has to say about you. And they cut to basically just like the portion of the sentence that Scott was saying about wanting to put whipped cream on Jonathan and do stuff to him.
Right.
And then it cuts right away to Jonathan Schmitz standing there with his face in his hands. He's very obviously feeling upset about this. So then Jenny is like, oh, Scott was open. He was fantasizing about you when he first saw you under the car the first time. He had an under the car fantasy and a hammock fantasy. Did you have any idea that he liked you that much? And Jonathan just keeps saying no. And then Jenny's like, oh, can you tell us about your status? Are you with someone? Jonathan's like, no, I'm definitely heterosexual. Donna lives upstairs from me. I met Scott one night when I was looking at her brakes. He commented that my car looked like a hippie's car and that I didn't look like a hippie though, because I guess his car had like a big peace sign in the back window.
Right.
Whatever. Anyway, Jonathan does say though that he knew that Scott had told Donna that he found Jonathan attractive, and he said that he was flattered, and then Jenny completely cuts him off.
Right.
And she's like, oh, but you're not interested? Oh, there's no way? There's no way? Well, at least you got it out. So Scott, are you disappointed? And then it just kind of like closes up from there.
Right.
Now, according to Scott's mother, the people at Jenny Jones had basically told them just before they went on that Jenny allegedly said, allegedly, that they better make it good or she would be very mad. And aside from telling Donna and Scott that, the producers also allegedly had like a bunch of flowers pre-bought that they wanted Scott to give to Jonathan.
Whoa.
And they trying to manipulate him into kissing Jonathan and like forcing that upon him. So there were a lot of hands at play, and that is a very big part of this.
Right.
So needless to say, Jonathan's expectations about what this were going to be ended up getting completely flipped.
Right.
So it was no secret that Jonathan had been suffering from some really serious mental illness. And on top of that, there was really no denial that he had a lot of homophobia brewing up within him.
Right.
It's hard to say whether that was coming from a place of like denial of his own potential sexuality, or if it was just like an internalized aggression toward men that he considered feminine. Like, I don't know what it is. He's, in Scott's words, a short little guy, so there can be a bit of overcompensation there. But point being, Jonathan's situation mentally and socially was toxic as fuck.
Yeah.
So basically, as a result of this taping, Jonathan was afraid that his obviously fragile masculinity had been jeopardized. Therefore, his ego told him that he needed to seek out some sort of revenge on that person who had done wrong to him. That person is Scott Amedure.
Right.
Jonathan was scared that not only people would be laughing at him for being a chump thinking that he was getting back with his girlfriend, but then on top of that, that everyone would think that he was gay, which was just the worst thing possible.
Can't imagine.
3 days after returning home from the taping on March 9th, 1995, Jonathan returned home in the morning after staying up all night drinking with friends from work.
Right.
When he comes home, there's a suggestive note on his front door. It says, if you really want to get it off, I'm the only one who has the right tool. And it was signed from Scott.
Shit.
Jonathan Schmitz, fucking shark eyes, just gets in his car, goes to the bank. takes up money, goes to a store, buys a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun, goes to another store, purchases ammunition, and then goes to Scott's trailer. He goes up to Scott's store, knocks, Scott answers. Jonathan questions Scott about the note. Scott Amedure supposedly cops to it, says, yeah, it was me, has a smile on his face the whole time. He was kind of hoping that this would be like a cute little flirtation that could still say, you know, like, hey, cutie, I'm still thinking of you. Jonathan walks away, goes back to his car. When Jonathan goes to his car, he gets his 12-gauge shotgun that's loaded. Scott sees this and tries to close the door, but he's not able to because Jonathan's already made it to him and has stuck his gun between the door and the door jamb.
Shit.
So Scott starts backing away, and he gets into the kitchen and he grabs a chair and tries to defend himself. Jonathan Schmitz shoots him in the chest. Scott stands there and puts his hand to his chest and then falls to his knees. And then Jonathan shot him one last time in the chest again. After that, Jonathan Schmitz walked out the door, got in his car, went home, called 911 to confess that he had killed somebody who had humiliated him on the Jenny Jones show. You can hear the 911 call. I don't fucking recommend that you listen to it. I didn't want to hear it. It's not cool. It's exactly what you think it is. You don't need to fucking know. So Jonathan is apprehended by police right away. The case ends up getting press instantly. And with an admission of guilt, with all of that evidence, they get him in trial ASAP. At the trial, they blame Schmidt's diagnosed manic depression and his Graves' disease. Now, Graves' disease affects your thyroid, and it can essentially cause irrational and aggressive behavior. It doesn't lead you to kill people, though.
Yeah.
They also cite Jonathan's past suicide attempts, because supposedly there had been several.
So they basically tried to paint him as the victim.
Completely. And they said that he was driven to this behavior and this action because of his mental illness, his past drug and alcohol abuses, and how humiliated he was at the hands of the Jenny Jones show. At the trial, they ended up showing the production notes from the show that very clearly indicated that Jonathan didn't want anything funny going on.
Right.
Those are also the same notes where they show Scott Amedure saying that he thought that Jonathan is probably bisexual. And he goes on to say that he's expecting Jonathan to just die when he sees me.
I mean, in retrospect, that's kind of spooky choice of words.
Girl, I'm with you. Thing is, at the trial, they're also able to prove that Jonathan was sat in a green room with a large bottle of vodka.
What the fuck?
And again, if you had vetted your guests, you would have known that is not what you want to do with this guy.
Yeah.
So they basically started him out by sending him into a downward spiral, which ultimately 3 days later led to this murder. Now, the producer of the Jenny Jones show tried to say that Jonathan was already drinking when he arrived on set. Supposedly he came in with a beer in his hand.
Okay.
But Donna also testified that the producers of the show had said beforehand to all of them that if they were nervous, they should grab a few drinks.
Because it will help loosen you up. It'll help make you more candid. You'll feel more comfortable.
Exactly. And they suggested the night before they could go out and drink. And they also said the morning before you are sent to go to studio, feel free to go down to the hotel bar. We have a tab set up for you.
What the fuck? So they just fly these people to Chicago, tell them they can drink as much as they want. It's on them. It's like a little mini vacay. And all they have to do is appear on national television in between.
Yeah, so basically they fill this guy up with alcohol. They put him on the spot on national TV when he's overflowing with toxic fucking testosterone. And then essentially Jonathan Schmitz's defense says that he experienced gay panic. They tried to explain that as the logical explanation for why Jonathan did what he did after being on the Jenny Jones show. So let's talk about the gay panic defense for a second.
Yes, please. I've never heard of this. Is this actually a thing?
Oh, fuck yeah. In fact, it's illegal in 3 states in the US now. So it's essentially saying that somebody can fall into a moment of temporary insanity due to unwanted same-sex sexual advances.
What?
Yeah, it's the ugly cousin of trans panic defense. Like, you know, when courts justify the killing of trans women and usually trans women of color because they try to justify these fucking men killing them with saying that the women set up an encounter under a false pretense. You know what I mean? Like that whole like, oh, when he realized she was trans, he was just so taken aback, he just couldn't control himself.
Yeah.
Back in 1995, people were just like, oh, gay panic, totally. So
What
people
the
were
hell?
really trying to work this fucking angle. Because at the time, people truly believed that some people just could find it so disgusting to be advanced upon by the same sex that you could be pushed into a state of psychosis where you could commit unnatural acts of violence. And like I was saying, in courts, the gay panic defense has been banned in the states of California, who were the first to ban it in 2014, Illinois, who banned it in 2017, and Rhode Island, who banned it in 2018 by the American Bar Association.
Right. But in all the other states, it's still like a viable defense.
Well, I wouldn't say it's viable, but it's just not outwardly banned in the books.
Right.
But let's not put it past some states.
Yeah.
Anyway, they try to cite gay panic. They try to cite all of this stuff. Mental illness, past alcohol addiction, none of this justifies killing somebody.
Absolutely not.
So on December 4th of 1996, Jonathan Schmitz is convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 to 50 years. Now, it couldn't be first degree because it was not premeditated.
Right.
Even though there was proof that he made the decision, goes out to the store, goes out to another store, like all this kind of shit. So
Yeah.
like, girl, you were thinking about it as you were doing it.
That's it.
It wasn't just like you had a gun in your hand and then all of a sudden in a moment where you were just hanging out, you just all of a sudden bam, bam in the chest. No, mama, you went out and prepped for this. But regardless, that's the sentence he got. He's not eligible for parole for 20 years. Almost 3 years later, in 1999, Jonathan's sentence ends up getting overturned due to jury selection errors.
What?
He ends up getting retried in 1999 and gets the same damn sentence.
Wow.
Yeah. Later that year, the Amedure family, so Scott's parents, end up suing the producers of the Jenny Jones show, Telepictures, and Warner Brothers for the carelessness that led to Scott's death. So they put them on blast. Now, Jenny Jones has to go to trial at this point.
Right.
She ends up being steadfast, saying that they made it super clear to Scott that it could be a man or a woman.
Right.
Now, the thing is, before this went to trial, Jenny Jones, in interviews, was trying to cover her ass so fucking hard. Because when this trial came out, everybody immediately was like, great, production ambushed this guy. They didn't do their due diligence and research him, so we need to change that. And on top of it, while his act was extremely homophobic and violent, it was triggered exactly by the chain of events that the Jenny Jones show set out. And what they were doing that day had no other goal other than to try and embarrass those people for the sake of entertainment in one way, shape, or form.
Exactly.
You could see it by the way Jenny Jones was talking to them, cutting them off, pushing the conversation, replaying certain clips. There is no doubt about it. So the thing is, Miss Jenny tries to be real cute in interviews. She says the producers very clearly tell Jonathan Schmitz beforehand that his secret admirer could have been a girl or could have been a guy, and supposedly, you know, like really laid it on.
Right.
Deal is, though, the whole time Jonathan Schmitz is steadfast in saying that they misled him to think that it was a woman.
Right.
When Jenny Jones ends up having to drag her ass to court, she ends up admitting under oath that they did not want Jonathan Schmitz to know that it was a man that had a crush on him. So she was being all bowdy in interviews, but as soon as she was under oath, the truth came out.
Right. So even if they like said that it could be a woman, it could be a man, they were probably like, it could be a woman or it could be a man.
Exactly. So in May of 1999, the jury ends up finding the Jenny Jones show irresponsible and negligent after only 4 hours of deliberation.
Shit.
So they're in favor of the Amedure family and ordered the show to pay them $25 million.
Whoa.
Yeah. So about $10 million per parent, plus about $5 million for some other stuff, and $6,000 for Scott's funeral arrangements. The judge ends up saying that the show intentionally created an explosive situation without due consideration concern for the possible consequences. And according to the judge, in a recent interview, so he's no longer on the bench, and he was spilling the tea. So basically, before all this shit went down, before the verdict, all that stuff, the judge was there when an agreement between the family and Time Warner had been struck up. Then he saw the representative from Time Warner leave the room to call the Warner people and confirm the amount that they would pay out to the Amedure family. They come back into the room and they're like, sorry, the company said that they will never settle this because the ratings that they're getting are too high. Because Time Warner not only held the Jenny Jones show in their hands, they also owned Court TV. So they were getting gavel to gavel coverage on the entire trial.
Shit.
Yeah, they had exclusive rights to film this baby, and they were getting more ratings than ever. So they had the show that people were outraged watching. They had the court case that everybody was interested in watching.
And they just wanted to keep it going.
Exactly. So it goes to jury, family gets $25 million. Almost 3 years later, in October 22nd, 2002, the family hasn't gotten anything. The Michigan Court of Appeals ends up in a 2-1 decision, ends up overturning the ruling in favor of the family. Basically, they said that Warner would not have been able to know what would happen from the situation that they had very overtly set up.
So you mean the family didn't get any of the money?
No. And here's the really fucked up thing. The lawyers representing Amedure's family were able to prove that 3 experts had consulted with the Jenny Jones show in the year prior to Scott Amedure's death, all warning producers of the Jenny Jones show that if they were hosting these shows where people were getting ambushed on live television and you were bringing in real people and doing all this kind of shit, that something bad was going to happen. One of them was somebody that the Jenny Jones show actually reached out to. So these were like social workers. They're people who were in kind of like the world of sociology and psychology and all this kind of stuff. So 2 of them reached out on their own accord after seeing these ambush episodes of the Jenny Jones show. And then another one had been reached out to by the producers of the show, allegedly, to be like, is what we're doing okay? And they told them very flat out, no.
And really, if you have to ask if it's okay, it's probably not okay.
But they didn't fucking care. Here's the thing. This is fucking ridiculous. This whole thing was foreseeable. And ever since the decision was overturned, Amedure's family has never been able to get a second of the Court of Appeals time. They've been iced out. Now, since this unfolded, talk shows have become really careful about who they bring on. Talk and reality TV generally screens participants for mental health prior to arriving now. They look into your history, all this kind of stuff. They vet you because of what happened to Scott Amedure.
It usually is that, though. It takes some kind of extreme tragedy for anything to change, because it's not until something terrible happens that they actually put things in place to prevent something terrible from happening.
Totally. And I should say that this is kind of speaking to a larger paradigm shift that kind of happened in the talk show world at the time. But Jenny Jones and her crew, for the most part, completely unapologetic about this. They do not hold themselves accountable for what happened. In fact, I saw an interview with Jenny Jones where she basically is like, oh, well, Jonathan reacted so gracefully on the show. He was totally aware of the situation. And then Jenny Jones went on to say that it was Jonathan's choice to do it and that he suspected that it was a man, and he specifically thought that it was Scott, supposedly. And she says this in a really desperate, frantic way. She's just trying to sell this. Supposedly, Jonathan had asked Scott the night before if the secret admirer was Scott, and that Scott said, well, what if it is? And that Jonathan supposedly said that he'd still go for it. And then Jenny Jones brings up in this TV interview that Jonathan had supposedly asked Scott after this embarrassing filming for Scott to change his flight so that Jonathan and him could travel back together. And then supposedly when they landed back in Michigan, they went to a place called Brewski's Bar and closed the bar out together. And then supposedly, according to Jenny Jones, Donna, Jonathan, and Scott, after a night of drinking together, after this whole crazy whirlwind of being on her show, then went home and Jonathan supposedly suggested a threesome.
What?
Yeah, so it's a whole bunch of mental gymnastics here. It's a really layered situation.
And you said the episode never aired, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even like the episode aired and that Jonathan was like made fun of or teased or ridiculed. All of this shit happened before anybody ever saw the episode.
Yeah, and it was just all preemptive shit. Like, he was just worried that this was going to happen as a result of it. It never crossed his mind that, you know, people could just look at it and go, oh, wow, you got had.
Right.
Which is probably what would have fucking happened if we're being real honest about it.
Right. So he'd basically rather be a murderer than be accused of being gay.
Exactly. And just to add a cherry on top of this bullshit, on August 22nd of 2017, at the age of 47, Jonathan Schmitz was granted parole and released from Parnell Correctional Institution.
No.
He's a free man today. He's probably living under an assumed identity. In an interview with Scott's younger brother, Frank Amedure Jr., he basically says that he does not think that Jonathan Schmitz has been away long enough to have been cured of his homophobia. And in the family's eyes, there is no bringing back Scott. And the fact that Jonathan gets to be a free man today thumbs its nose in the face of justice.
Right. And at the age of 47, he's just middle-aged.
Yeah, he's still got a bunch of life to live. So if you can't tell by my voice, this story pisses me off. This is one of the most famous examples of the gay panic defense trying to be used in court. On top of it, you have essentially somebody committing a hate crime that gets to walk. That is not fucking right. Now, there is a part of me that can look at Jonathan Schmitz and say, look, I've suffered through mental illness, not the same stuff you're going through, but I understand what it's like to feel mentally like you're in a hole. I know what it's like to feel like you're about to make a new change in life and then be disappointed by that. The deal is, though, we all experience disappointments. We don't go out and kill people over it. You can experience addiction. You don't go out and kill people over it. This is a perfect storm. The Jenny Jones show set him up. They didn't vet him, and they were irresponsible with how they handled the situation. It is very fucking clear. This whole situation was set up to prey upon his insecurity. He was a young, hot-headed guy, and a big part of why this went down the way it did was because of toxic masculinity, if we really want to call it what it is. He felt that his fragile male ego was being jeopardized, and because of that, he lashed out at the person that made him feel less than. From the moment that he was brought on that stage and all of that happened, the Jenny Jones show producers lit a fucking fuse in that guy. And I'm not explaining this away with toxic masculinity. Y'all know how I feel about this. Men are raised to be shitty and reactionary. They are raised to be aggressive, and this is what we're seeing here. A man who could not deal with his emotions and his disappointment, who ultimately killed somebody because of that. On the other side of it, I will say, Scott Amedure leaving a note on Jonathan Schmitz's door is another example of toxic masculinity in this case that I don't think ever really gets talked about. And I'm going to address this as a gay man right now, because gay men can be just as pushy as any fucking straight man. I have been hired by other gay men to do things professionally and had them put me in situations that I have been very uncomfortable with. I have literally sat in job interviews at gay establishments where I have been asked the question, if a customer were to shove their hands down your pants and grab you by the penis, is that considered sexual harassment? And then they look at me with a little grin, expecting me to say no.
Right.
So when I say men are trash, honey, we all are. But here's the deal. Scott Amedure, I'm not victim blaming here, but what I will say is that after this whole situation, what you don't want to do is go and goad this person any further. Now, Scott probably didn't know about the mental illness. He probably didn't know about the addiction and all that, but no means no. And unfortunately, a lot of men are taught to believe that no actually means yes, and maybe just for you. And this does not excuse anything, but what I'm saying that this is part of a perfect storm. So it's fucking layered, and that is the unfortunate part of this story. The Jenny Jones show set them up. Jonathan Schmitz was not in a good place, and he was easily triggered, and his concept of identity was fragile. This triggered him, and he did something really fucking stupid and really fucking hateful. Now, the Jenny Jones show stayed on the air until 2003. It's off the air now. No one really talks about it anymore. In fact, they probably talk about this murder more than they talked about the impact that Jenny Jones had on television. Because to be completely honest, there wasn't really that much positive impact. This is kind of it. So that is the story of the murder of Scott Amedure, also known as the Jenny Jones murder. But if you really want to know my fucking opinion, it's not about Jenny. It's about fucking Scott.
That's right.
And I'm sorry about that rant at the end there, but you know what? Not sorry.
Better out than in.
So I guess we've come to that point in the show, Tyler. Time to go over what we learned. So, Tyler, what have you learned this week?
Well, I guess it would be a cop-out if I said that this week I once again learned that men are trash, but maybe we'll just keep it a little bit more specific. And this week I learned that Jonathan Schmitz is a big shitty baby.
You forgot to say dumb. He's dumb too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a big, dumb, shitty baby.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I would say that this week I learned a really great way to shake everything up. Pretend like you don't know anybody's name anymore.
Right. Assume a new identity.
Put everyone on the same level. Amnesia, the great equalizer. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate it. If you're enjoying the show and you want access to some really cool bonus content, you can sign up on patreon.com/thatsspooky. There you can get bi-weekly mini episodes. You can get updates from us, a little behind the scenes stuff. There's also a ton of other really cool perks that you can get on there. So you can hop on over to that website and get all the info. If you're looking for a completely free way to show some love for the show, you can leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us.
And if you want to see more of the spooky gay bullshit we're up to on the weekly basis, we party over on Instagram and we partake on Twitter. And you can follow us on both of those platforms at That's Spooky Pod. That's THATSSPOOKYPOD.
Yeah, and you can find links to everything we just mentioned, along with show notes and links to listen to episodes on our website, thatsspooky.com. It's an experience.
Yes, and it's always nice to have some visuals because just like the library ghost, we love stories with pictures in them.
Totally, and I don't think we've ever really mentioned on here, but like every week when we post an episode, there is a specific piece of cover art that's drawn for it by Tyler. Ding! We also post key photos from all of the stories, all up there on Instagram, and it also shows up on the website. So if you don't go on either of those and check it out after you listen to the episodes, you're kind of missing a really cool little layer of the podcast.
Yeah, girl, you're just getting half the story.
Welcome to 2019. We're also multi-platform here. And if you have any spooky stories of your own, if you just want to say hi, if you want to tell us about a secret society that doesn't suck.
They all suck. Spoiler alert. I tried finding one this week. They all suck.
Yeah, well, a boy can dream. You can email us at thatspookypod@gmail.com. It's spelled just like it is in the Twitter and the Instagram. And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and so thanks again for listening, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Did you flat iron your hair? It looks like you flat ironed your hair.
It looks really good.
All right, well, kissy kisses, everyone. And don't forget, if you're going to be a bitch,
Be a spooky bitch.
Bye.